time to forge the narrative.
Hey everybody, welcome to Forge the Narrative. My name is Paul, your host. I'm joined tonight by Adam Camilleri and Red Powell.
Hey. Play 40k every day.
Good evening, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. In the middle of this show, I have a community spotlight / vendor segment to introduce. I get to talk with Jay from Discount Games Inc. and about some of the other projects he's going on. We revisit Crisis Protocol. I can't not like that game because it's about comics. So we hear about how his experience with it is growing as the game is maturing and more things are coming out for it, and how he's enjoying the game with things like his podcast and stuff like that. So please check it out in the middle of the show. We are the Bella Lost Souls podcast. We're going to talk about a variety of things. I want to kick it off with some success. Adam, what'd you do this past weekend?
I went to a Brisbane Southside Wargaming Teams event. It was a 4-man Teams event. I took Mono Dark Angels and ended up doing pretty good, I think's the term. And by pretty good, I mean I crushed it, and I was absolutely amazed by how much power they have now.
So, what teams event, 4-man teams event? I guess you did. How much manipulation in the pairings did you get? Do you think you got just a string of favorable matchups, or were you the guy that pushed out for take all comers type thing?
Well, so we skewed our 4-man team to have 2 lists with flyers in it. So my Dark Angels list had 6 flyers, which I'm sure probably doesn't come as a huge surprise to a lot of people. And we had a gentleman bringing Space Marine flyers as well. So we were able to use those or wield those. So one of us would always get a decent pairing, because naturally in like 4, if you take an all-comers spread of 4 lists, you might have one of them that's really good against planes, that's really anti-air, like that's a mech Eldar list with all the expert crafters and all the rerolls and stuff, or it's another Space Marine list with stalkers or iron Imperial Fist or whatever. But yeah, we tried to skew it by having 2 fly lists. At the onset of it, I thought I was actually going to really struggle with a lot of the scoring elements. I thought I was actually going to get outscored by a lot of armies. Like there was quite a few lists that had like MSU sisters that ignore the -2, and that's what I was spamming. I was spamming strength 5 and strength 6 -2 rend. And I thought that people were just going to take a bunch of stuff that I couldn't kill fast enough, and they'll just snowball the scores away from me, like, just run away with them. It was ETC or WTC missions, so they were the combination of Eternal War, Maelstrom, Kill Points, First Blood Warlord, Linebreaker, that kind of thing. And so there is a lot more. I mean, I can't quite talk to the new ITC missions yet. I haven't played a lot of games of them. In ETC scoring, there is this propensity of snowballing. Like once you get a decent amount of points early, it starts to just increase and increase and increase.
Yeah, people
that's
can't
mostly due to the
battle back is
Yeah. And that's mostly due to the fact that a lot of the Eternal Wars are progressive scoring now, and also the progressive scoring on the Maelstrom. So once you get board control, you start racking up an exponential lead in both Eternal Wars and Maelstrom, and then it's really hard for people to catch up. So a lot of people in team events, they'll go through and you'll put predictive scores in for how you think you'll go in certain games. And I can tell you that mine were all incorrect. They were mostly incorrect.
Well, because let me talk about the -2 with the sisters a bit. So that is, it's good, right? I mean, you think and they're going to save more, but they're still toughness 3. You're going to wound them more often. So it's really on an offset. Right. It's not a 33% offset. It's still only a 16, which is good. I mean, take it, and that's one of the stronger abilities, like base level abilities that they have. But you are still getting through a lot of damage.
Well, exactly right. And on top of that, one of the biggest things they'll leverage is you'll get cover, and they ignore -2, and so you'll be punching into them you'll give them a bucket of saves, but a lot of the time they'll be taking their saves on 2+ if they can. Like if the persisters player, I even think Tau can do this now on a unit of crisis suits. You can have a unit of crisis suits that ignore the Rend 2. And so of course you're going to try and get those guys cover as well. So not only are you ignoring 2, but you're essentially +1 to your save on top. So you're taking 2 pluses. But where that gets wonky with my list is because the Talon Master model is just so efficient. Firstly, it's so efficient and so good for its points. But on top of being able to reroll 1s, it ignores cover in a 6-inch bubble to Ravenwing units.
Oh, that's nice. That's right.
That's all the planes. So all the planes are ignoring cover on top of being -2. And so by the end of it, each plane was giving about 10 saves to the sisters player. So each plane was killing between 3, 4, 5 sisters each. On top of that, there's, they've got the Rift Cannons -4, and in Dev Doctrine, same as the missiles on the jet fighters are -4. And so it's just all wounding on 2s, just doing crazy snowballing damage.
But going into that, thinking that might have been a weak matchup for you.
Yeah.
Did you choose that, or were you just stuck with it? Like, again, how did the pairings go?
So it's a really interesting one. In four-man pairings, usually you have it's usually won or lost by trying to predict the opponent's champion. I'm not quite sure if people out there are familiar. So what will happen is both teams will roll off. Usually their captains will roll off, and the loser has to put up a player, and then you get to pick one of your 4 to match into them. So usually your first pairing, if you win the roll, will be a favorable pairing, because they'll be forced to put up usually what will be a strong list that doesn't have a huge amount of weaknesses, and then you'll put something favorable into it. Either that, or if they think they're not as good on the pairing side of things as you are, they might bust somebody saying, sorry buddy, you're going straight under the bus here, you're going to get absolutely hammered, but the rest of us might get good ones if you take this one on the chin. So what I was usually doing is if they would lose, I'd go into the person they put up first. If they couldn't handle planes, then that would automatically be a good matchup for me. Or I would go up first or second, depending on if they've got a 1 or 2 lists that can handle planes. Like I said, we had 2 planes lists, we had 2 fly lists. Now, I was really phenomenally surprised about how relevant the plus 6-inch range is for Dark Angels and Devastator Doctrine. So,
well, was that due to just deployment zones coming into play a little bit more often than you thought?
Yeah, and the Nephilim jet fighters all have 36-inch range on all their guns. So going from 36 to 42 and having a 20 to 40-inch movement and still being able to shoot is quite effectively, especially because they got +1 to hit ground targets. It means like I could strafe for a turn or 2 outside people's ranges and still be in range myself. Where this became really prevalent was actually I played against a Siegler-esque tower list. He had the triple riptides, 38, 42 odd drones, a couple of commanders, and then a bunch of buffing characters. And I was able to strafe outside his range and make him move 2 turns. So he couldn't get a carry-on off. He had to Montcar turn 1 and then shoot and hit me on 6s and then 5s on his one guy with the the velocity tracker. And then I was able to drop back again and make him move again. So he was outside 36. I sacrificed shooting my Dark Talons, but I was still shooting a fun bucket of shots. Because on top of the 3 Nephilim jet fighters, I also had what some people consider to be a bit of a joke unit for a long time. I had 3 Landspeeder Vengeances in my list.
So that's the Forge World model that looks kind of like an enclosed jet.
No, it's not. That's the Landspeeder Tempest. The Vengeance is the alternative kit for the Dark Shroud. It's got the plasma cannon on the beefy Landspeeder.
Oh, that thing, the DJ booth type thing or whatever?
Yeah. Okay. DJ, that's perfect. That is perfect.
That's how little I've looked at the model or that codex.
Man, I don't think anybody has. I don't know anybody else who's taken that model. I took it because I liked them as a screen for my Sammy and my Talon Master. They meant that I could shoot off all the planes with coverage with Dark Shrouds and still essentially have a fire base. But my fire base all had fly. They all had the fly keyword. They all had.
If you put a gun to my head, I would not be able to tell you what that thing did.
So they come with either a heavy bolter or assault cannon. I bought mine the assault cannon because I just had points. I had nothing to spend on. And so I had 3 of them, each with an assault cannon. And then they have it's a Vengeance plasma battery. So it's D6, strength 7, -3, 2 damage, overcharged to strength 8, -3, 3 damage. And they're 36-inch range. So these are 42-inch range and at -4 when you're mono Dark Angels in Dev Doctrine. And so, and people, so here's the trick, yeah. Everyone was all like, don't they just overcharge all the time? And, here's the trick, yeah. Never re-roll 2s. If you roll a 2, don't touch it. Just let it ride. It just missed. It's fine. So the D6 shots, and then, I have the Talon Master next to him that ignores the penalties for moving and shooting. He can either stay with them if they need to move around a bit, or he can jump off and follow some planes around. Because another funny thing about the planes, because they got +1 to hit against ground targets, if you ignore the penalty for moving and shooting, they hit ground targets on 2 pluses, which is actually quite silly when it all turns on. And so because they hit so reliably, they actually don't need Samael's rerolls all that much. So he can stay and give them rerolls to hit with the Vengeances. And so people were surprised I was overcharging them so much. But with D6 shots, essentially you're going to get 3 or 4 shots on average, but it's only 1 D6, so who knows what you're going to get. And let's say I get 6 shots. If it's the proper spread, mostly you're going to get like 1 or 2 1s, 1 or 2 2s. Usually you're only going to get 1 or 2 shots that's going to hurt you. What happens with these is when they overcharge, they take 3 mortal wounds, and then you can't use the gun again the rest of the game. The gun just blows it up. It's gone. Which is hilarious. Tragic.
Oh, whatever. Then you got a bit of a screen target or an objective holder or whatever.
Exactly right. That's what they become. Or what I was doing, I was just charging them down people's throats and making them have to kill them after that. It's like, I'm just going to go tap one of your artillery pieces.
I mean, technically, if they charge you, you do get the Overwatch and then try to, either kill them in that turn or whatever,
It's
or
true.
you have them fail the charge because they don't move.
So the way I skewed my list, I'll just go run through it now. So yeah, 3 Nephilims, 3 Dark Talons, then an Outrider with Sammy, a Talon Master who had the Oculus, so it's the +1 to hit, +6 inch range. So he has +12 inch range, so it's actually crazy. And he has the +1 to hit. He also took the, the 6 inch aura of you don't take penalties for moving and shooting. So this one Talon Master, 180 points. He has a twin linked heavy bolter with +12 inch range, so which goes to 48 inch range heavy bolter, and then a +12 inch range twin assault cannon, so that goes from 24 to 36 inch range. And then he has an ignores cover aura, a reroll wants to hit aura, and ignore the penalty for moving and shooting aura off this one dude. And like, you talk about value, my God, what freaking value that guy brings.
That's strong. This is a good couple of weeks for, I guess, Fringe or B codexes. Our man Stephen Box from Vanguard Tactics won a really large tournament with Blood Angels.
Yeah, Mono Blood Angels should be right up your alley.
It is. I mean, seeing his list of develop and blossom, as he's been playing it's really heartwarming, and I'm certainly going to borrow some ideas for mine. He's got some things in there that I would not consider, and I think he's continuing to innovate. I don't want to steal any thunder from him because I think he's putting in the reps with the army.
Yeah, and I mean if you want to challenge Space Marines, if you want to go into the Space Marine meta with some confidence, you should just reps. Find something you think has the teeth, the strength, and plays the way you like, and then just see how far you can push it. Maybe you fall short, maybe you don't, but I don't think there's any downsides. I think the worst thing you can do with the game at the moment is jump around from army to army to army. Oh, this one will fix my problems. This one will play better. This one will feel better.
Yeah, you just get in there and know what you're, and Red, you're actually someone that can, I think, speak to that probably better than anyone.
Exactly. The chasing the army deal, I think some of us affectionately call that chasing the dragon, and in regards of chasing that meta, right? And so, I totally agree in that building proficiency in a set army. Now, don't get me wrong, there's always, especially with how some of the meta changes and with this rapid release of Psychic Awakening and everything, there's always some cool stuff to try out. And we've definitely gotten a little bit of love here and there in different ranges of armies out there. But so for example, fall last year, I think I ran at 3 units of Berserkers at minimum in just about every single game I played. And I can tell you the nuance of the fight phase, I'm definitely not a stranger to that. And it's playing those same units over and over again that I was prepared for the variable of situations. And I'm sure that, with the Dark Angels and playing, like you said, how many people are running those land speeder variants, right? And so other people that are playing around, jumping from different army to different army, might not be prepared for the variable that comes into play when you see someone across the table, and then you throw in that Talon Master with all of the buffs that he has. If you've been jumping around through different armies, you might not be as ready or prepared with the tools that you have available and what you need to address that specific problem.
Proper threat assessment.
That's right.
So the reason that I love the Landspeed of Vengeance is because Centurions exist. So I'm sure everyone's aware of the weapons from the Dark Age stratagem, so +1 damage on a plasma weapon. So when you overcharge the Vengeance, it goes to flat 3 damage. So weapons of the Dark Age, you go to flat 4 damage. And I didn't play any Centurions. I managed to, Centurions have actually started a little bit of a decline in Australia. A lot of people are moving to, less. Also, the thing with Centurions is there are a win big, lose big scenario. But I don't think I've seen a major be crushed or torn open by Centurions since the first couple of months of the Space Marines. I think they've dropped off quite significantly.
Right now, they're firmly at the top tier of the gatekeepers, if you ask me.
Yeah. I mean, Brad Chester took Raven Guard and he came second at LVO using Centurions. But I don't think I've seen Centurions absolutely dominate and crush their way through, because I feel like when they don't work at all. But when they work, they absolutely
man, let me also state, the Gatekeeper list you're going to see them at majors in the middle tables a lot, but at 3-rounders, they could absolutely just run roughshod. There's strength in the list, and you're talking about a great player. So I don't want to besmirch his list design or choices. I still think that they are what I would consider top tier of the thing that's going to come in second.
They're the best. A Centurion model, a single Centurion is actually probably arguably the best model in the game. If you took a single Centurion and broke down its stats, its damage output, how maneuverable you can make it with White Scars and Raven Guard, and flexible and all these things, and how durable you can make it with Iron Hands and stuff. It's actually probably the best thing in the game. There's actually nothing that probably compares to how much you can do with that one model. I just think that though, because of the low movement, because of the very predictable ways you have to wield them, e.g. like Master of Ambush for Raven Guard or the Slingshot with White Scars, they become known quantities that good players can work around. Like you can figure out how to not let them destroy you. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to throw any shade at anybody.
But like Berserkers are known quantities. Yep. But if you get if you start to like internalize the nuances of the fight phase, then you can really catch people out of position because of the sheer amount of times that you get to position your model.
For example, I mean, I was playing a list against some Iron Hands, and a very good player, and he had, I mean, his formidable Iron Hands list in front of me, and in the core of it, he had some Centurions that he was using. And to your point, Adam, you know, you're right, like, there is a lot to it, but you do know, like, what they're, I mean, it's very much known quantity. Okay, I cannot get stuck. I can't allow them to shoot at me, but at the same time, I can't get stuck in combat with them. And so I went in with Berserkers. I cleared out the first line of intercessors I needed to cut through. And so a trick that I would tell anybody talking about the nuance of the fight phase is that because I understand that I charge, so, and of course will say, you know, in this case I had declared them also as a target, and I was able to get through without taking Overwatch. I mean, you know, there's all these really good circumstances that played out, but the fact was I knew I was going to activate again, and so I went in and I killed the first rank of guys in front of me. I consolidated in after I killed them, but I consolidated in so I was just outside of an inch of all of those Centurions so that they couldn't fight. Like, he didn't get a chance to activate, right? And so it's that kind of nuance where making sure that you have the tactical patience and restraint, and I kind of hit on this last time, Paul, in regards of, you know, making sure that the game is moving at your tempo and your pace. And so I stood right outside of an inch because I wasn't about to just go in there and let him interrupt on. And then I fell into him after that because he couldn't even react to me, and I was actually able to kill all those Centurions in one fight phase.
Nice. Wow, that's impressive.
I mean, so 8 Berserkers with boosted, so I've got this joke that I make my A squad of Berserkers go Super Saiyan, and even with transhuman physiology working against me, I've got Death to the False Emperor plussed up, so I'm generating attacks on 5s and 6s. I've got an increased AP, so I'm at AP -2 with my axes. Veterans to the Long War for +1 to wound, and then with a Exalted Champion, I'm rerolling all my wounds, and a Chaos Ward nearby for rerolling 1 to hit. And that's that little squad right there can that one squad will cut through quite a bit, I'll tell you that.
Like, legitimately, that's a threat to just about everything. Even like a knight is going to take like a third, 2/3 of its HP from full. You might even kill it. Like, if you get the chance to attack twice, if it doesn't like interrupt or manage to kill half the squad.
So get this, and I mean, some of it this is not necessarily luck, but at the same time, it definitely, there is something to the fact that those dice rolls, right? But in my second game at LVO, I played against an awesome dude, Wyatt, who had 3 or 4 knights and 2 Helverins, Chaos type, and I charged through a wall, so I was able to a Helverin, a knight, and a knight, and I actually was able to, now there was a little bit more into it, I had a Chaos Ward that also made it, everything, but essentially one squad of Berserkers killed a Helverin and then killed a knight in one go, because you figure AP -2 with veterans, right, and all those other buffs. I totally took out a knight, and then I crippled the other knight down to a handful of wounds.
That's ferocious. Wow. And I'm so happy that Berserkers have retained that level of, I mean, they've had to have all these extra layers added onto them buffs wise to try to keep up and stay relevant. But the fact that they're still meat on the bone, that makes me happy.
They've been pushed a little bit, I guess, and then getting a little bit of help from the Psychic Awakening, which I think the Psychic Awakening has helped basically everyone but Gene Stealer cults. But the Gene Stealer cults also didn't need as much help as some of these other lists. So I mean, whatever. I'm not. You know, it's the world's smallest violin as far as I'm concerned. You know, but it's the player, I think, that makes Berserkers and stuff as good as they are, because you could easily screw up a lot of those activations and put yourself in a position. Heck, like 3 or 4 weeks ago when I was talking about, like, I forgot to do a charge, and it turns out it was like the most strategic thing that I did was, you know, forget to declare the charge because he could have interrupted on me, you know, like something thing that you were just talking about.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right. And that I did the exact same thing to that knight player, understanding the tempo of it. I didn't commit into the knight, so I didn't have to get intervened by it, or I wasn't interrupted. And so there was nothing slowed it down in the pace at which, and of course, by the time a knight gets worked down to their bottom bracket, for example, if you don't kill them, they're hitting on 5s or what have you, and it's just not that much. And even with, you work an 8-man squad, because I almost always only run 8-man squads berserk, you run them down to even 4 guys. I mean, 4 guys left unheated. They're not nearly as good. I will gladly, I'll throw out there the free chicken in regards that if you can reduce the berserker squads, not necessarily worry about killing them completely, you can definitely diminish them significantly because of the way the buffs and the strategy work. But they definitely cut into it. And again, I can't stress enough, going back to your point, Adam, of playing and getting reps and everything, I definitely wouldn't be nearly as good in the fight phase if it wasn't for all the practice that I'm giving with these berserkers.
Being able to see those moves, 2-3 turns in advance, or 2 or 3, plan out where you're going to be at your final activation with those guys, I think is, if you can visualize it and see it, what's the meme with the, doing all the math or whatever?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's, so I walked up to every table and I told everybody straight up that they just need to stay away from me. Just deploy as far back and just shoot me and play a tower defense game, because I'm a level 4 NPC and I'm just going to charge my way in there. And that's like clearly telegraphed. I'm going to go and that's all I'm going to do. And I threw out all the stratagems I was going to do up front. I told them about the other one I have that allows me to consolidate 6 inches. But I'll tell you what, so geospatial awareness, right? Like what you're talking about in regards to the math equations and whatnot, when you think about it, that if I'm able to charge a unit, and let's say that you give all the space that you want and whatnot, but if you leave a unit in the middle, if you put scouts or stealth teams or whatever, I'm going to charge and hit those guys, and then I'm going to consolidate 6 inches, and let's say I fight 3 times. I mean, that's 18 more inches after that initial 6 inches. I mean, you're talking a total of, not even counting the charge, just in pile-ins and consolidates, you're talking, 9 times 3 there, 27 inches of just movement.
That's gross.
Yeah.
Well, be on the lookout. That's all I'm saying.
I want to tell you guys about one game. So one of the worst matchups for the army I took was the Mech Eldar. So that's this guy had 2 Crimson Hunter Exarchs, 2 unit of Shining Spears able to go to 2+ Invuln and Fortuned, 3 Night Spinners, a couple of Falcons, and he had 6 Vibro Cannons. Man, those things are good, by the way. They're really good. I'm not sure if they're as good in ITC because they give up a lot of kill and kill more. But in ETC, gosh, they're tough.
I just did a spot on 40k Stat Center, and nice. one of the lists that did really well, I guess it was last weekend, was Colin Sherman with a bunch of Vibro Cannons in the Canhammer team tournament.
They are legit, and with the expert crafters, they become really reliable. But why this is funny is because he essentially had an artillery list. He had a guard-esque artillery list with like a Bulgren Star in the form of the Shining Spears. And I had a -2 to hit flyer list, and I was the Eldar player in that situation. So it was like Eldar versus Guard, except I was playing Marines and he was playing Eldar, and he was the Guard player. And do you know what? I had flashbacks to past days of the horror and terror of playing Guard artillery and tank commanders and Lehman Russes into -2 and 3 to hit flyers. And I'm just I actually know exactly how to play this game. So first turn after he went first, I just degraded every single one of his tanks. I was like, all right, I'm going to half kill that one. I half killed 4 of his tanks. And then next turn, his entire army was hitting me on 6s. And I was like, how do you like it? How does it feel? live my pain.
That's gross, you guys are both describing what is a little bit of discipline.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is I don't want to say it's uncommon, because we can all rationally think about what the best thing to do is sometimes, but it's also easy to get kind of caught up in the moment. Common convention is to, once you start wounding something, burn it down till it's gone, or in the context of moving things in the combat phase, move the max that you can, get in contact with as much as you can. To set yourself up for maximum damage, the next time.
Well, I'm sure coverage of top tables and of top players in the world is out there for anybody to see now. And what you'll notice is that defensive 40k is championship 40k, in my opinion. People who are able to control the pace of the game. And I think Richard Siegler is probably the best example I've seen of this. People who are able to control the pace of the game and know exactly where they need to be each turn in order to win. Not to maximize the win, not to crush it, not to absolutely destroy their opponent, but just to win. 5 or 6 points, 10 points, doesn't matter. People who could control the pace of their own armies, not overextend or overcommit, at the same time, control their opponent's threats. I think that is like superb. Like things like just controlling where you deploy and where you move. Just simple as that, saying like, hey, you can come in, you can, commit yourself to, coming into my zone and my control area and trying to combat me and dig me out. But it like 90% of the time, unless things go perfect for you, it's going to be an overcommitment and you'll lose whatever you commit. And therefore, you're creating this kind of a deterrent buffer zone. And then you can control the pace as it goes forward. So, and people go watch Richard Siegler's games like at the LVO. I think they're a perfect example of that.
Nice, man. Well, let's take a quick break. We're going to come back with that Community Spotlight segment with Jay, and then we'll come back with us. See y'all in a minute.
FTN is brought to you by Discount Games Inc. Please visit them at www.discountgamesinc.com. And don't forget to ask Jay about ways to save even more on your hobby projects.
Hey everybody, welcome to a Community Spotlight segment of Forge the Narrative. My name is Paul, your host. I'm joined this evening by Jay Larson.
Hey Paul, how you doing?
Yo man, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, you bet.
People gotta know you by now.
Hopefully.
Well, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. You're the guy behind Discount Games Inc. That's the ad that people hear in the show.
Yeah, I've been advertising with you guys for a while now, and we love the listeners of your podcast and appreciate any time that they send business our way.
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, try to pick up some hobby on the cheap sometimes, especially with some of the things we talk about. We've been talking about, you and I, some new games that have come out. And the last time we had you on, I think we talked a little bit about Crisis Protocol. That's the Marvel game. It's for those that may not know, I think it's 40 millimeter scale. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
40 millimeter scale based on the Marvel superheroes. And you can get the box set for pretty cheap, and it comes with a ton of, like, the starter box set comes with a ton of stuff.
Yeah, the starter box is this is pretty common, I guess, with a lot of games where you get a really good value from the starter box, but it feels like Atomic Mass kind of outdid themselves with their starter box.
Well, I've put the box together, and the miniatures go together pretty well. There's even, like, the weird thing that took me off guard a little bit is that the sprues, with some of the tinier pieces, it comes with a second pair or bit.
Right, some duplicates, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it's like, they must know that I've dropped every single bit before I've glued it on.
Yeah, I think that, some of their models that they're coming out with, they've been learning with the process as well as more things release, and so, I expect to see improvements with the miniatures as the game line continues.
I do think they're really good miniatures. That wasn't a criticism of the extra pieces.
Yeah,
that was I'm more of a thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. You can, when you drop Baron Zemo's arm pad onto the floor and or just lose all hope. It's nice that there's
Thankfully, I didn't actually find myself in that scenario, but there was 2 Spider-Man faces, and so if I dropped Spider-Man's face, I couldn't have been able to live with myself if I wasn't able to. I guess they had extra spot, and you might as well fill it up with today's technology with sprues and the way whatever they manufacture them. It's just kind of neat, and the fact that it comes with some scenery, it comes with a nice chunk of rules, an instruction manual that's pretty close to whatever, everything you need.
Yeah, absolutely. It has some great terrain as well. And so I think they've done a really good job. And one of the things, a few things that I really appreciate about this game. The first one is that I've been a big fan of the Marvel movies, and it really feels like you're kind of playing a scene from a movie. The models look really good, and it just really evokes the rule set also helps evoke that feeling as well. You're throwing terrain at each other and all sorts of crazy stuff. And so that's one of the things I enjoy a lot about it.
Now, the box comes with heroes and villains. Is it to where when you build your force that you have to take on like a full hero force, or can you mix and match heroes and villains and do the
way that it works is you can build a force out of whatever you want. However, if you want to, there's different affiliations within the game, so things like the Avengers, Wakanda, the Asgardians, etc. If you want to play the Avengers, then greater than 50% of the characters in your army have to be Avengers. But so let's say that I'm playing a 5-character force, and 5 characters is a pretty common. 4 to 6 is probably the most common range of the number of models that you'll be playing.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm playing a 5-character roster, or team, I should say, that means I need to have 3 Avengers, and the other 2 could be from wherever or whatever.
Including bad guys if you wanted.
Yep, absolutely. So you can have Captain America teaming up with Red Skull, or whatever combination you would like.
That's cool. So the game you came out with the initial box set, which is, what is it, like, it's like 12 characters or something? Is that
10
characters?
Mm-hmm.
And then they came out with some expansions, like along with it. I think it was like Hulk and MODOK or something.
Yep. Those were the 2 that were released on the initial launch. Yeah.
And now it's gone past that. Now we've got Black Panther and it's his sister, right?
Black Panther and Killmonger were in one box set, in Wave 2, and then there was also Shuri and Okoye in another box set, and then Venom was in another box set.
Yeah, I like Venom a lot.
Yeah, they did. His sculpt is really good.
Yeah,
it's also really good in game.
oh, nice. Okay. So cool miniatures, and these are things that you pick up, like they come in packs of 2s or single packs for the larger, like it's probably still 40 millimeter scale, but they're larger figures, kind of like Dreadnought size.
Right.
To anyone who's only familiar with 40k listening.
Another thing that I have really appreciated about the game and about what Atomic Mass has been doing is that really they've been focusing on having the game be fun and be accessible to everyone. Their first tournament format that they came out with is basically let's say I was going to run this event at my store. It is, regardless of how many players are in the event, let's say it's 32 people, it's still only going to be 3 rounds. And each round, it's just random, whoever you are paired up against. And you get some extra prizes if you're fully painted, and there's kind of a random, bigger door prize. It doesn't there is no first place per se. It's kind of a door prize that can go to someone.
Oh, so they have an organized play set or something you can get.
Yeah, there's an event kit that you can purchase through distribution, right now. There've been a few. There was an initiation league as well that you might still be able to get, but was intended to kind of slow grow you into the game, and you could get some things like alternate art cards and stuff like that if you played in that event.
Because each character comes with a stat sheet or something with their powers, and there's a series of there's a small amount of tokens, or I would say what would be considered a slightly, I think in my opinion, less than normal amount of tokens for games, modern games. A minimal amount of tokens, and I'm saying that as a positive, because I actually when we get to a token threshold and I start to check out.
Right. Yeah. I mean the core box set has some tokens, and then in each of the expansions you'll have kind of 3 things in the package. The first one will be the model itself. The next one will be some cards, and they could be scenario cards, action cards, stuff like that. There will also be the character card, and then the last thing will be like a token sheet, and that'll be associated with either like the scenario stuff or maybe some affiliation tokens, stuff like that. That's what you'll get in each expansion.
What are the types of things that you're tracking over the course of a game?
I mean, one of the things that's kind of fun is they've had, when the game is very scenario focused, and a lot of times, and this also kind of helps with the kind of evoking what I said about the feeling of the movies, but you'll have different scenarios, and it might be, we have to gather up these fragments of the cosmic cube, or we have to move the Wakandan herbs to this portion of the board. As you're doing this, so if I'm going to do the Wakandan herbs scenario, that expansion comes with tokens that have the art for Wakandan herbs on the token, so that it just kind of helps a little bit with like the immersion, so that what you're playing with looks correct. So if I'm gathering up cosmic cubes, and there's actually a cosmic cube token for me to do that with. So nice. Stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, as far as like the character stats, you tracking their hit points and powers, because I believe there's like a series of like power up type stuff.
So yeah, the main things that you'll be tracking, there's taking damage. You'll track power each round. You gain a power. Another thing, a cool mechanic with the game is if I deal 3 damage to my opponent, he's also going to get 3 power. So that's kind of a power-up mechanic or catch-up mechanic that's fun with the game.
Well, that's invoking some like pro wrestling type stuff for you.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And then there's also a few status effects that you might gain. So stuff like bleed or stun or, some effects like that.
I get you. So there's some stuff coming up that is up, I think, in my opinion, or at least my impression for pre-order, things like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, so we mentioned the kind of the Wakandan stuff that just came out, or recently, the stuff that just barely came out. There was some Asgardians, so stuff like Thor and Loki and Hela, and the model for Hela, I actually think is phenomenal. People should check it out. And then some of the upcoming stuff, there is, the Guardians of the Galaxy, like you said, so Groot, Rocket, Star-Lord, etc. But then also there is the Black Order, and so, some of those models look really cool as well.
Oh, is that like Ebony Maw and stuff from the movie? Okay, yep. Which I guess was in the comic too.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, they're putting this stuff out.
Yeah, I mean they're looking to do around 2 to 3 boxes a month. So one of the things that's nice with it is that if people want to be kind of collectors or completionists, it's not as daunting as some, like, as a retailer, it amazes me how much product Games Workshop puts out. I understand that, not...
You got big pipelines.
People don't buy everything by any means from Games Workshop. It does feel like if you're a completionist, it is feasible or possible for you to buy everything. But also, I don't feel like you're at a big disadvantage if you say like, I just really like the Guardians of the Galaxy and, the Asgardians, and that's what I want to play. And you'll be fine if you do that. So
do you feel like the characters are fairly balanced to where I can take whatever the roster size is, and you can take an equivalent, I guess, collection of stuff and we can play a game that's fairly equally balanced? Yeah, absolutely. I think that they've done a really good job with balancing the game. So I'm really happy with that. That's neat. I do like how they've got obviously a lot of stuff that's just from the movies. I shouldn't say just from the movies, linked to the movies, but there seems to also be a fair amount of stuff that's fan, I guess maybe a little bit of fan service. Yeah, I mean they've had a pretty good mix of stuff from comics or stuff from the various things, and one of the things that's been fun with it as well, in my opinion, is that when you look at the characters, some of the abilities and stuff like that they have are just pretty funny. So a couple examples. The superpowers that Loki has are I'm a god, trickster, Asgardian, god of mischief, and Gembear. And meanwhile, MODOK, his superpowers are bow to the will of MODOK, imbecile, all the world is a weapon to MODOK, P-Brain, MODOK's genius is infinite, and psionic force field. Oh, that's cool. So it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's yeah, I mean, and it's another thing that's cool about it is that it's fitting to the character. So, like Iron Man, his powers are Friday AI, Invincible Iron Man, and Flight. Some of the people who were involved with creating this game have a deep love for the comics, and I feel like that comes out in the product that they've made. That's nice. So you're still having fun with it after release and playing through the various waves? Yeah, I mean, I really have been having a lot of fun with the game, and so I feel like you can play it just occasionally if you want to, but also if you want to kind of focus in and dive into the game, then I feel like you'll be rewarded for that as well. The miniatures went together extremely easily. I put the entire starter box and, I guess at the time, Hulk and MODOK together. I mean, it may have taken me 3 or 4 hours or so, but that was everything, including the terrain that it came with. It came with 2 cars, a newsstand, and maybe, was it one other piece?
Some lights and some
that's right.
traffic lights.
Yeah, and that's
stuff like that.
I mean, they're pretty detailed, and they still went together pretty quickly. So it's something you could get out of the box and up and playing. I mean, over the course of an afternoon.
Yeah, at least I would not be able to accomplish that, I don't think. But your listeners, I have faith in.
I guess I do. I put together models fairly quick. I got a bit of a system, but I, a lot of it comes down to the quality of the model too. So if the model if the sculpt is good and the casting is good, then it goes together a lot quicker. And I found that to be the case with these models.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, even with the delicacies, I mean, like some of the characters have delicacy, arm, especially like Black Widow and Captain Marvel. They're a little bit more delicate than say the Hulk, and they both went together pretty well without a lot of fiddling to have to do, which is nice.
Yeah, one thing that's been nice with it is that I play a lot with my models, and I'm usually pretty rough with my models, and I haven't had any issues with stuff breaking apart so far, so that's also a thing that's a big plus in my book.
Are you guys still doing the podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast I do is called Recalibration Matrix, and the focus of it is we spend half of the podcast focusing in on the gameplay aspects of the character, and then the other half is us talking about a comic book arc that is associated with the character, and it's kind of a comic book club. That's
pretty neat. At the time that we had you on, you had just started your first arc. Have you gone into the second one yet, or second or third or fourth or whatever?
Yeah, I mean we're on episode. Later tonight I'm going to be recording episode 18, and each episode we go over its own arc, and each one's, the average one is 6 comic books. So, in the last 4 months, I've read, probably over 100 comic books now.
Yeah, heck yeah. I'm on board with that.
Yeah, and that's been fun. I haven't really had a ton of exposure to comic books, and one of the things that's difficult with it is that it's just kind of an overwhelming sea of, if I were just myself trying to step into this, I wouldn't really know where to begin. And my co-host is actually a really big comic book nerd, and so he's helped out a lot with selecting the different arcs that we've been reading, and so it's been nice being able to, and hopefully that's kind of the experience that our listeners will have as well, having someone to guide them with some suggestions on things they can do to approach or gain access to comics.
There's a bunch of stories out there, and I mean, comics have been, of course, in rapid motion for 60 years or so, if not more.
Yeah.
And so having someone kind of point you to some of the gems that are hiding back there. I got to turn someone on to Kraven's Last Hunt recently, which is an arc of Spider-Man comics.
Okay.
I highly suggest you and anyone else go check out that. If you're a fan of Spider-Man at all, this is one of the definitive, I think, story arcs of Spider-Man.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's highly worth checking out.
One of the things that's been nice with our podcast as well is that all of the comics that we read are on Marvel Unlimited. And so, I just have a subscription to that, which is relatively cheap, especially I did the year subscription, which cuts down the price quite a bit. It's been nice to be able to just, download whatever and read it when I want to.
Man, that's awesome. What arc are you following right now or about to start?
The next one we're going to do is Secret Empire, which is the one where Captain America is the Hydra agent.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one that we're recording tonight is Secret Invasion.
Okay.
And so those are actually a little bit longer arcs than we normally do. Usually it's
spanning a bunch of titles too.
So usually they're about 6 comics. Like I said, Secret Invasion is 8 comics, and Secret Empire I think is like around 12 or so. So it's been a lot of fun. I
won't spoil it for anyone, but the one you're about to cover has a pretty cool climax. I don't know
cool.
if you've read it yet, but
No, I'm just a few comics into that one so far.
knowing that there's an end to it will get some people through, because I'm telling you that when they pulled that with Captain America, people were not happy.
Yeah, it's been kind of an interesting read so far. Yeah.
Well, it'll be cool to hear y'all's take on it. Where can people find your show?
There's two places you can check us out. If you go to Muse on Minis, we have our podcast posted there. Another place you can go is to Patreon, and if you support us on Patreon, and if you listen to it there, the Patreon supporters, they're some of the big benefits that they get from it. They gain access to the podcasts a week early, and then also there's a bonus episode each week that the Patreon supporters get to listen to.
Awesome, man. Well, Jay, thank you so much for coming on the show and taking time out of your evening, especially when I know you got to go and do some other recording.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me on.
I will post some links to that stuff in the show notes. And then if people are wanting to check out the game, they should definitely check out your web store.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Have a good night, man.
Yeah, you too.
FTN is also on Facebook. Please like us at www.facebook.com/Forge the Narrative.
Hey, everybody, we are back. I got Adam and Red here.
Hey.
Hello.
We got a cool topic to discuss, but before we do that, I want to talk about the coolness. This is like a brief impression of a finishing move segment, if I can really briefly. The White Dwarf, the February White Dwarf that's come out recently, is absolutely chock full of cool paint splatters and paint tutorials. And it's the ones that attracted me were more on the nurgly side. There's a couple of different ways of doing a rust effect in there. And I know we've talked about like rust and grime and dirt and stuff before, so I won't talk about it again. But one of the things that I look for in tutorials is like, I will watch, or I'll go find 10, 11, 12, 15 tutorials. I need to find the one that speaks to me. And I think there's several interesting ways of doing some of the effects that maybe people have talked about before in this most recent White Dwarf. And so if you're still struggling with some of those like weathering or rust effects, really check this issue out. It always has paint articles and stuff in there, but these, I think, were kind of different ways to get across that effect, which is, neat to have that variety and variation.
Nice, man.
There's also like a quick tip in the beginning. There's seemed to be like a response to a letter for how to make coral armor on Deepkin, and it's got a real subtle effect to it. Basically using like an orange glaze, orange that they've mixed in with some of the bone colors. I definitely suggest checking that out if you're looking for that. That's one of the things that if you can get a cool like ceramic color type effect, that's something that looks really good on Marines and Eldar and that kind of stuff. So, just because when you're looking for tutorials, I suggest looking for the effect that you want, not necessarily the model that you want. That's one of the things I look for.
I was recently looking at ways to do a marble effect on the wings of my Dark Talon. They've got those marbled wings. And I found about 5 or 6 different ones, but the best one I found was one for doing knight's armor, like an Imperial Knight armor. And they used a steel wool technique that I ended up going with. It didn't quite look as good as theirs, but it was the first time we've given it a go.
Well, it takes practice, man.
Yeah. Exactly right. And I find like seeing the finished product of a new technique to be one of the most thrilling parts of the hobby. It's really cool. Just jumping in and saying, I'm just going to give this a go.
Well, you add this stuff to your arsenal, essentially. So whenever it comes up, you may put, an armor, a marble plate on a piece of scenery next time, or make somebody's storm shield look like that, or whatever.
I wanted to do this ages ago, to use a marbled effect, but the steel wool idea I didn't end up going with. I tried a bunch of other things, ended up coming back to it later. But I wanted to do like the armor on Necrons. You know how there's that green Sortek armor?
Yep.
I wanted to do that, green veined marble as the effect. I thought it would be really, really, really cool to have like that on the shoulders of Immortals and on the backs of Destroyers and stuff, because they've got some nice big flat pieces to the models. Like, and it actually scales up quite well, like all of them do. They've got this nice flat open parts to them, which you can be used to putting some cool effects, like to the same effect it gets as what Imperial Knights are. Like, it's the same kind of dimensions of the model. And yeah, I feel like there's a lot of options there, and it's all different horses for courses, but it's just, I just love trying new things.
Well, just a quick word of advice is that I heard a cool adage earlier this week that comparison is the death of happiness.
Absolutely.
So find things that work for you, and you might not get the same effect in the same way that someone else does, but you might go one tutorial down the line and something just clicks for you. And then be ultimately happy with be realistic about what you expect out of the effect and what you try. And, you might not nail it on the first time. It may take a few goes, and that's okay. And then as long as you get something that you're happy with, that enthusiasm about what you've done translates out, to other people when they're playing you, when they're checking out your display case or whatever, or there's, the plumber's walking through your hobby area and he's like, what is this? This looks cool. And then you get to talk about it. I mean, again, so don't. This thing that stuck with me is that comparison being the death of happiness was. I was like, you know what? I've been there. I've absolutely been there, and with our hobby, that's one of the traps we can get caught in.
100% agree, dude. Couldn't have said it better.
So let's jump to this topic. So operational framework.
Right. Yeah. So operational framework is this concept, kind of lens that we use in some of the real world concepts we have in regards of how we lay out a battlefield, right? So for planning efforts and for situational awareness, right? And situational understanding, right? You can say you can have situational awareness, but having situational understanding and going back to some of that play that, like Adam, you were talking about in regards to Siegler, that ability to look ahead and see things. Part of that comes down to being able to break down and understand the battlefield itself, right? And so in operational framework, we kind of do this deal where between us and the enemy. And so in this case, it's fortunate because there's this game and the abstracts that get applied to it by the mechanics. We look at the game and you've got a 6x4 table as it is currently, and you understand where your deployment zone is and where your opponent's deployment zone is. And you each have your own respective operational framework, right? And so when you think about your opponent's plan, you have to understand where they're coming from. And then, of course, when you look at yours, you understand where you're coming from, given your deployment zones and what's in between, right? Which we more often than not call no man's land. And so when you break it down, you've got your rear area, your support area, which, for some armies, that's your deployment zone where you've got objectives that you put back there. And you might have, whether you're Chaos and you have Cultist, or it's Imperial Guardsmen and you put infantrymen back there, or what have you, but in other cases you have take Imperial Guard, or in some cases, sure, Space Marines, right? Iron Hands with a bunch of Thunderfire cannons in the back, or what have you. That's what's in your rear area. And then you've got your main battle area, your essentially where do you want to kill the enemy. And that can actually, if you're in the attack, so the attack or defense, sometimes these areas shift or adjust according to what part or what phase of your operation, your plan, your tactical execution that you're in. And so when you lay it out, you've got your support zone, you've got your main battle area, and then you've got the most forward area, which we call the security area, which can also be known as the disruption zone. And that's where, so when you consider where infiltrators are going, or where the scout moves, where essentially first contact is made between your forces, that's kind of what we're talking about here. And so if you imagine that you've got your battle space and your opponent has their battle space, you can kind of pick up where they start to overlap, right?
Just trying to, the way I'm seeing this application kind of in, let's say an ITC mission, you've got like a 5 or 6 objective mission, a 4 objective mission, one in your deployment zone, 2 in no man's land. One of those might be positioned more advantageously to you, one might not be. And so it'll be the one that's not advantageous to you where you feel like you're going to be fighting over, yeah? Like you can see it just as simply as that one thing's going to dictate your ability to get hold more, your opponent's ability to get hold more. And therefore, you can start seeing that as a position where you need to invest resources. Is that kind of, am I right or wrong here?
Yeah, no, exactly. So you figure, you look at it, most Space Marines, I mean, there's platforms that have range, go back to the Thunderfire cannon, but, we talked about Centurions and, the relative range of some of the Centurions. And this goes into kind of the benefit when you look at like your Dark Angel. I was talking about why it's so important to have that extra 6 inches, is that you start looking at what your most effective range is and where you can actually mass the concentration duration of your effects to a certain degree. And so, I will argue, or I'll put forth, that a lot of Space Marine armies, to a certain extent, and you look at Grey Knights now and everything, now they can deep strike and whatnot, but really their mobility is somewhat limited. They are still ranged for the most part, right? But you kind of, like, you'd think for the case of like these Iron Hands intercessor armies, that if you had the choice, so you're playing, we'll say, my Berserkers, right? I'm going to put my objective as close to you as I can, because I know I'm going to have to get to, right? I'm not going to leave my objective closer to me. I'm going to try and put it closer to you. As the Iron Hands player, it's probably in your favor to put that objective close to you as well, because you're not going to really have to go far, because I'm coming to you, right? And so, go ahead.
So it's looking like it's a more holistic way of approaching a game than just, here's my big hammer play models. I just have to get the most out of them and I'll win. It's much more of a seeing a battlefield for a battlefield as seeing your components as a general would, like, not as somebody who's just saying, I've just taken this list off the internet. I'm just going to push this big knight into your face and I'll win the game. I like that. I think the word holistic comes to mind, whether that's applicable or not. That's just what pops in my head.
No, it's supposed to be, right? So when you develop the transition, situational awareness is hard enough to establish, right? Especially so fortunately we can see where everybody's at, right? When you put your models down and someone deploys and you know where they're at, like, there's no real fog of war element outside of deep striking there's a couple elements where people can pull models off, put them back on, but for the most part, fog of war has been relatively reduced in this case, right?
They become known quantities. Like if you're aware of the army, you know what stratagems they have. You can apply like some game, like the real world game theory. Like, what is the best maneuver they can make here? They're probably going to do the best thing that they should do.
Correct. Yeah. And so with this, what we're looking at is you've got the holistic view, like you're saying. You understand what you have available, what they have available, and you're not so much locked into. So, like, take for example, even with the Berserkers, right? Or a possessed bomb. Like, there's a very specific chain of events that have to happen to really capitalize on the effectiveness of those units, right? And so if you don't make those things happen, you can kind of thread that apart. Well, so as the opponent, you want to be able to reduce their ability to make this chain of events happen. And so if you approach it in a holistic view and you say, I'm going to break up the battlefield in this degree, but of course, depending on what's what, I adjust the framework of the battlefield better, I can attack it in this way versus this way with what I have available. It's supposed to be something that allows you to rapidly reorient your forces dependent upon what you're fighting. And in a game where you have, approximately 15 plus factions, I think that's a crucial element in regards to the game itself.
Is this something that you've been, I guess, seeing play out with your style of army? Is this something you can apply to any style? Like, where do you see this being most leveraged to the benefit of a general?
So for myself and playing games, I've kind of beaten myself into a rule that I play with called the rule of two, and I know that has some other funny implications, but in regards to this, it's about, really the core of it is redundancy and making sure that I have more than one of typically any given thing, and you can't just pull apart a list that I make because you kill one thing and I'm suddenly out of that option. I like to be able to have sustainable options, I guess you could say. And so in the case of Berserkers, I'm not just, even though I understand there's only one squad that's going to get all of the benefits of those stratagems, I have 3 squads that I can position, and then I can choose which one I actually want to be able to apply those effects to. And if you kill, 2 of them, I've at least still got the one that I can try and get into the fight to whatever extent. And so that's something that for myself, as far as being able to have that flexibility, to a degree, I recommend that to some folks. When you're sitting there and you're building a list, and I'm sure, Adam, if you're leaning into Dark Angels, I can sympathize with, between Deathwing Knights and Ravenwing, Black Knights or what have you. It's tough to have a redundancy in effect. You're stuck with one type, you're not necessarily stuck, but it's difficult with point values and whatnot, and you don't want to just have that one unit that you sink everything into.
Yeah.
And then if something were to happen, null zone or whatever, suddenly they don't have an invuln, and then they just pick apart by AP.
Oh, if they just brought the one thing that everyone takes already.
Right.
Yeah, redundancy is so important. So important. Well, but where I think you're leading to, so there's obviously there's going to be the most efficient things for each role, but at the same time, you can take things that do something half as well, and then with synergy make them perform to an acceptable level in lieu of like that better unit. The way when you just said Deathwing Knights, if I took aggressive and Deathwing Knights, Deathwing Knights was a purely melee powerhouse unit. They'll go straight through just about anything. Whereas aggressors can almost hit as hard with as many attacks, and they can almost go through the same amount of things, but retain a different role in and of themselves. But they can pinch hit for the Deathwing Knights should they get taken out, should they be not applicable. So there is ways, like obviously you're absolutely right. Like I don't think there's a good Dark Angels army that has 2 units of Deathwing Knights. That's like a third of your army, and there's no shooting in either of those units. At the same time, like if you took Deathwing Knights and aggressors, which is actually a list I'm looking at, because you chuck in Asmodai and Azrael to the aggressors, and all of a sudden they go exponentially better, and then they are legitimate melee threats as well as a shooting unit, and they can hit almost as hard as the Knights. So there is other ways of going into redundancy in a role rather than just redundancy in a unit choice.
Aggressors are almost there. They're just almost there.
Absolutely. I think that the key thing here is that also, and a lot of people have a hard time in the real world capacity of this, is understanding that it's not about the unit so much. I mean, even in the real world capacity, it's about the effects achieved, right? And so you want the redundancy of effects, and as long as you can have stuff that accomplishes it, like you're right on the money in that regard. As long as the general understands what can do the same thing that you need it to be done, that's far more important than the name of the unit that's on the ground accomplishing it.
100%, man. I couldn't agree with that more. In fact, I saw somebody using what I thought is a very, very unfortunate model at the moment, which is the Rubric Marines on the weekend. There's a gentleman at the same team event I went to. He also went 5-0. I think he came 2nd or 3rd on battle. And he used a 20-man unit of Rubric Marines to like great effect. And they weren't there to kill anything. They weren't there to, charge or deal massive amounts of damage. They were literally there to get buffed up and just keep you in your deployment zone. And
it's by jumping over there and playing like goalie, like aggressive goalies.
Aggressive goalie, yeah, because there's 20 of them. You can buff them up, make them minuses to hit. Plus they're invulnerable save. Plus they've got the all this dust +1 save if you have only got +1, if you've only got damage 1 on your weapons. And so that he would just dark matter crystal or deep strike them onto opponents and just say, you're staying right here until I spread out on all these objectives. And naturally, as I said, like the progressive nature of the Eternal Wars and Maelstroms, that enabled him to just snowball scores really, really effectively. And so, but see, he was exactly the same as you. He was focusing just on an effect. Like, what effect do I need from this unit? I need this unit to just literally keep my opponents in their deployment zone. They don't need to do damage. They don't need to charge. They don't need to do this. Just get in the freaking way. And despite that unit, it's an expensive thing. Especially when you add in the casters and the synergies needed for it to play its role. But yet he went 5-0 with it. Like, he did really well. So,
yeah, it sounds like he was able to really control the theater of the war there. I mean, that's like when you put that many points in your opponent's face. I mean, again, I know team tournaments are slightly different, but you make your opponent deal with it and commit a lot of resources in one place.
Yeah. Yep.
Actually, my brother's been trying to run large units of the Thousand Suns as well, and that's exactly what you're saying, Adam, and their ability to put them forward and to control. So it's so the operational framework and talking about the main battle space and deploying them forward with the deep matter, the dark matter crystal, that kind of deal. It's kind of, you look back at the another aspect like chessboards. There's a kind of a Fisher concept in regards of if you can control the middle of the chessboard, if it can't be moved, right? If you can't be moved off of it, I mean, you essentially control the rest of the game after that, to certain extents, right? I know there's different techniques and whatnot, but that is a elementary technique in chess for sure.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Yeah, I like these concepts of how to. I mean, really, we talk a lot about controlling the momentum. We talk about being more aggressive, and what you're talking about is being a lot more, I think, calculated in your last two things you've discussed on the show.
Yeah, well, and so there is some calculated aggression too, right? Because I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm running, whether it's corn or whatever, you just understand. So there's a time and place to hold, there's a time and place to push, right? And knowing when to exploit the gap or to push in and achieve success. There's a kind of laugh because I'm going through some of this in my own coursework right now, but sometimes, like what you were saying much earlier, Paul, in regards to catastrophic success, right, is that some people think that they're doing so well, and then they suddenly find out in the next turn that they have overextended themselves because they didn't project or plan on their operational reach and the impacts therein of what would happen if they got this far out of, whatever mutually supporting units they had. And that kind of calculated aggression, not in this case, but saying you need to have the calculated aggression to ensure that you don't do that, because if you do, you could very much find that you had very successful second and third turns, and then you're picking up your models in turns 4, 5, and 6.
Want to know where it all went wrong?
That's right.
No, there you go. We figured it out. Where it all goes wrong.
We'll crack the code.
Well, again, it's all about really objectively looking at some of this stuff, so you can, it's really easy to blame, like, oh, I rolled bad, or my opponent got lucky, or something happened that was, dice dependent. And we do play a game where that happens. But, what you see is that there are some people out there that consistently finish on top. And, I think they are looking at the game through this type of lens. And so, us talking through it, I think, is really helpful to me. And hopefully some other folks listening. Guys, we can go ahead and wrap this up for this week. Next week, I've got another community spotlight segment. I'm gonna have on some folks from the West Coast of the U.S. come on and talk.
Cool.
I know there's we've got someone's already put in a request that we make sure to give the orcs the love, whenever we get some orc info. And I promise you we will. There's a lot to cover in this stuff, man.
Absolutely. Well, so one of my very good mates, very, very, very good mates, Liam Hackett, he was the guy who made the Mega Knobs a thing. He's the Australian orc player for ETC last year and will be probably again this year. I'm not sure if he'll be playing orcs. But I can't talk to the mastery of orcs, but I can certainly talk about the stuff that I'm seeing that I'm worried about, because he's like a player who legitimately will just crack my skull and drink my brains if I played against him.
Well, we've seen a lot of, foreshadowing of things to come on the Warhammer community site. We're going to be talking about how Psychic Awakening continues to make its way through the 40k army list.
Nice.
Yeah, well, Red, Adam, thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Y'all have a good one. See y'all next week.
See you.
Take care. Thank you.
Handle the truth.